This is the rebroadcast from my live conversation with Superintendent Ben Shuldiner. Phone lines are not open at this time. From listener-powered KUOW in Seattle, welcome to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. And today we're going to dive right in because I'm joined by Seattle Public Schools Superintendent Ben Shuldiner. He is here to take your questions and your calls. Shuldiner started as the SPS Superintendent back in February. He just hit 100 days in the role, and he's had to tackle some pretty big issues in that short window, like a budget deficit, which could be as much as $100 million, student safety concerns after 2 Rainier Beach High School students were shot and killed at a bus stop in January. Shuldiner recently implemented a new cell phone policy limiting student screen time during the school day. And he's got big goals related to enrollment and academic achievement. We're going to talk about all of this today and more with the superintendent, Ben Shuldiner, superintendent of Seattle Public Schools. Thank you so much for being on Soundside today. Good to see you again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And for folks who want to call in and ask the superintendent a question live, you could be on air with us. That number is 206-543-5869. Again, the call-in number is 206-543-5869. How was that 100-day summary that you just heard? I mean, does it feel like it's been 100 days? What are you feeling at this point in your tenure, sir?
It both feels like it's been one day and a million days. One of the things that's just been so wonderful is, I visited all 106 schools. We had 8 community meetings with over 1,000 people attending. I've really been able to meet so many people, experience the schools, talk to teachers, talk to kids, talk to educators, talk to families. It's been a whirlwind. It's been wonderful. And it's been really just great to get to know Seattle, to learn about the amazing things that are happening here and the things that we need to change. And so I really appreciate this time on the radio so that we can have this conversation about the great things that are happening in Seattle and the things that we do need to change to make it better for children.
You've said that you want to make Seattle schools the best urban school district in the country. I want to know, how do you get there? I mean, what is your number one priority at this point when it comes to moving the district into the future?
Sure. So I think there's 3, right? One is we have to be really thoughtful that we are about $100 million in the hole and we are going insolvent. You can't have a school district if you're bankrupt. And so we have to make sure that we are really thoughtful about getting money and spending what we're given and not spending more than we have. That is just a recipe for disaster. And so we have to make sure that we're being really thoughtful to spend every dollar we get on our children in the best possible way. So making sure that our budget is solvent, that we as a district are solvent, that's certainly one of the top 3. The second thing is instruction, right? We want to make sure that our children in the classes, in the schools, throughout our district are really getting just the best education possible. And that's really focusing on curriculum, on supportive teachers, on making sure that we're holding everybody accountable to actually teaching our children. I've been really clear that we have some of the best proficiency rates in the country when you look at us in the aggregate. But when you start to peel back that onion, you start to see that actually our free and reduced lunch numbers are, students of color, all sorts of different, students are not necessarily getting served as well as they need to.
Really big disparities there. We're going to talk to that more in a little bit. Yeah.
And then the third one is kind of trust and transparency. One of the things that I've witnessed in the 3 months and 14 days I've been on the job is that there's so many people in Seattle that want us to do well, want the school district to do well, but there's a huge barrier in terms of trust, transparency. One of the things I did, I write a weekly newsletter to the whole community, and over 70,000 people read it every day, every week, which is amazing. And one of the first things I said was, look, I'm going to always try to put kids first. I'm going to always show up and be part of the community. And we might make decisions you're not going to like, but we will always explain them. And that one is a big thing in terms of building trust and transparency, because I think this district's made a lot of decisions, but they don't necessarily explain it. And they certainly haven't done it with the community. Like, we're talking to the community, we're bringing in the community, and we're talking about students and faculty and staff and parents and everybody we have to do this together. So those are the big three: instruction, what's happening in the classroom, in the schools, the budget, and then building back that trust and transparency for the district.
Okay, so for folks who want to get a question in with Superintendent Shuldiner, Ben Shuldiner, I'm speaking with right now, Seattle Public Schools Superintendent. The phone number is 206-543-5869, 206-543-5869. And folks have already submitted their questions. A lot of people asking about cell phone policy in the district, the new policy that you implemented in May, 10 days ago. The policy requires that elementary and middle school students put their phones away for the day. High school students, it's different. They can have them out during lunch and during passing periods. Sarah Malda emailed about the new policy. She's a parent of an 8th grader who still doesn't have a phone, this 8th grader. And okay. Sarah says, I'm in awe of Sarah to have her 8th grader not have a phone yet. That's great. Sarah says she's happy to hear about the change, but she also said, the current policy is not at all enforced from what I hear so far from students. So I'm wondering, Superintendent, the policy is really new, as we said. Sure. What are your expectations for enforcement?
Sure. So, look, it's a brand new policy, but the good news is actually a lot of schools have already done it. One of the issues about Seattle is 106 schools, 50,000 students, and there's been patchworks, right? So some schools have had these rules for a long time, and it's really, really amazing. And I've visited all these schools, and some schools, it's either new for them or they just haven't been enforcing it. So what we have to do is really be thoughtful around which schools where it's working really well, and then maybe have them be models, show what's working really well for them. And then if there's schools that are struggling with it, how can we from central office really support that? This isn't meant to be, super punitive. It's, you ask a student, do you think you should have a cell phone out and looking at it while you're learning and having your class? Almost all children understand that that's probably not a good idea. So, it's about really supporting the teachers in the classroom and the principal and the school in terms of best practice of doing it. But again, each school kind of community is different, and we want to make sure that they're able to enact it in the way they want. Some of our schools have these pouches where they put it in and it's magnetic, and then they close it up and then they open it at the end of the day. Some of them use calculator pouches where kids will put it in. Some of them just have them in their backpacks. Each school is unique, and we want to support them. But I appreciate that the parent is saying that, in the last week or two that they've had it, it's basically the enforcement isn't 100%. That's probably going to happen, right? And so what we are going to be doing is hearing from the students, hearing from the families, hearing from the principals about where it's going well, where it's not, and where we can enforce it.
Why the high schools with the passing periods and lunches? Why are the high schools different? Isn't learning the same even if you're in high school?
No, there's a lot of differences. And I tried to explain that in one of the weekly newsletters. So there's a couple things. One, most of our high schools are open campus. So students are actually leaving to go to lunch. They're leaving to go to programs. And so there's no way you could enforce it. And so I would never want to create a rule that was unenforceable, right? So, and the other thing is you don't want to create a perverse incentive to say, well, if you go out for lunch, you get to look at your phone, but if you stay in for a club, you don't. That's really important. We want our kids to be active. And the other thing is we have to be recognizing of what our teenagers are doing. I mean, we have 17-year-old students who are, having jobs, and they have to make sure, is their shift on, is their shift off? They might be the person that's taking their little brother and sister, home from school or picking them up, or they have to deal with childcare issues. The last thing I would want is for a younger sibling to not be able to be picked up by their high school kid because they couldn't look at their phone to make sure that they were getting, and again, it's not during academics, right? We're not saying in the middle of math class, we're saying, hey, look, during lunch when you are on open campus. And the other thing too is what a lot of folks don't know is we have a ton of students that are part of CTE programs that are off campus. We have a lot of kids that are part of Running Start that do work, at the colleges. And so it's really just what we thought was the most thoughtful way of really making sure that we're protecting the academic time for the high school students, but recognizing the life that they live both within our school district and, with siblings and jobs and childcare and things like that.
We are taking your calls for Seattle Public Schools Superintendent Ben Shuldiner at 206-543-5869. Laura left a message earlier. Laura says, that she appreciates the new cell phone policy, but she is concerned that students are just switching to using their laptops instead. So here's more from Laura.
We found they've had essentially free range of the internet. Despite many safeguards, our kids are still able to play pretty inappropriate games and still see things on YouTube. So where does the district stand on general screen time limits and moving away from tech and back towards more evidence-based teaching methods? Thank you.
Superintendent, Laura has 2 Seattle Public School students. And I mean, what do you think about what she raises there? The screen time issue overall, not just cell phones.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. And in fact, again, in one of the weekly newsletters, I've been pretty clear is that we do need to reduce the kind of screen time for our children. I mean, there's tons of research. The most interesting one I find is that actually when children write with pen and paper, with pencil, the way that your brains and the synapses actually work, it's very different than when you're typing. And so there's lots of things that we need to do to reduce screen time so that our children are able to engage more with the learning, with their colleagues, with their students, 100%. Now, I will say, though, that there are some amazing things that children should be, availing themselves of that are on computers and that are technology, right? I mean, the last thing you'd want is a kid graduating from high school without having been on the internet, right? There ways of researching information. There's also ways to differentiate. There's so many things that modern technology can be good. But again, it's a tool, right? And so it's our job as a school district with our amazing faculty and with our families and our students to really think about what's the best use of technology. But I agree, in the 106 school visits that I've done, actually there were more, but I've visited every school. I did see somewhat of a leaning on technology that might not be as needed as making sure that the students were focused on kind of face-to-face learning and engagement. So
like they're passing the time on screens rather than doing a focused lesson?
Yeah, or that they're given free time to be on the computer, or that some of the lessons that are on the computer are not necessarily at grade level, or they're just a little bit more kind of non-structured. So there's ways that we could do it. But again, there's some things that actually using technology is incredible for. And so, we just have to be really thoughtful that the minutes that the children are in class are well spent. That's really, and that's everything from, bell to bell instruction where, hey, if the bell is ringing in 10 minutes, students shouldn't be starting to pack up yet, right? Like we want to make sure that all of the time that we have them in our classrooms is really being well spent.
I'm talking with Ben Shuldiner, the superintendent of Seattle Public Schools. On to that budget issue. That is a big one on your plate. I know we've seen estimates of the shortfall between $87 and $100 million. I talked to you a little bit about this when you first started. It was literally the day before you were traveling to Seattle in order to start the job. And you have talked about eliminating redundancies and staffing. You said that SPS appeared to be spending a lot of money on contracts outside of teaching. You have proposed cuts to the district's central office, which you've said could save the district between $8 to $15 million. Here's a voicemail that we got from Eric in Seattle who wanted to know more about these potential changes.
There's been all this talk about the cuts in the central office. So if you can just speak to that and just really give more understanding of what the direction might be for the cuts, more granular sense of what that would look like. Thanks.
What do you have to say to Eric?
Thank you for asking the question, Eric. I really appreciate it. So, currently we've already cut about $50 million from the budget, and we did a budget presentation about a week and a half ago. We cut $9.8 million from central office already, and just to put that in perspective, we cut about $9.6 million from the schools. As you can imagine, 106 schools. That's a much, much, much larger budget. So one of the things I'm trying to do do is keep a kind of a 3-to-1 ratio to make sure that if we are going to cut, we're going to cut 3 times percentage-wise from central than from the schools. Now, I, of course, don't want to cut anything from the schools, but again, if you're 100 million in the hole, you got to do some of it. But the question in terms of specifics, so in central office, as you can imagine, we have a lot of jobs. Some of them become vacant. We're not filling them. We're making sure that some of those redundancies are gone. We had a bunch of support folks that were centrally funded, but were maybe going to the schools sometimes, maybe not. That was reduced. We're actually trying to shift some of the budgets around so that instead of using operational money, we're using grant money or levy money. That also saves us. So look, we're always going to try to make the decisions to be as thoughtful about what's happening in the schools as possible. But we're definitely, as I said, it's $9.8 million. I can go kind of line by line each one, but we had there was a deputy superintendent position. We just got rid of it, right? If we didn't fill it, we're going to get rid of it. That's savings. There's really important things that we have funded before that we know we are not going to, because we want to save as many classroom teachers and assistants and paras as we can in the district. And the good news is, you're talking about a district with almost 10,000 employees. And so, every person matters. Every person who doesn't have a job next year, I am sorry, and I understand that, but we're really trying to mitigate it. So out of the 10,000 folks, maybe, we're going to try to keep that number as low as possible. What we're really trying to focus on are vacancies that we're not going to fill, and then also redundancies around contracts, things like that. And again, we have all of our budget presentations are public. You can go online. You can watch them on YouTube. You can certainly watch them on our website, because we want our community to be as informed as possible, because this is about trust and transparency. So when we make these hard decisions, people at least know where we're coming from.
You're listening to Soundside on KUOW. I'm Libby Denkman. Here with me is Ben Shuldiner, the superintendent of Seattle Public Schools. Just over 100 days on the job, taking your calls at 206-543-5869. And we have M in Seattle on the line. M, thank you so much for calling, and you're on with the superintendent. What is your question?
Great. Hi, thanks. My question is, we used to have, so I'm a Seattle Public Schools teacher, and every year we would have the opportunity to do a staff survey that could inform the district and kind of shed some light if there were possible issues going on at the building level. We don't have that survey anymore, and I'm just wondering, how is the superintendent getting information? I love that you went to every school. I think that's really great at the beginning. It says a lot, but as that's just really a quick visit, and you're going around with admin. And quite frankly, there in some buildings, the issues going on have a lot to do with admin, but the teachers and staff don't have a way to get that to the district, or to get that to, are we going to have those surveys back for a district that really prides itself on wanting to look at data, where we're really disheartened that we don't seem to have a say anymore in giving some of that data. Thanks very much for taking my call.
Thank you, Em. And if you can hang on the line, Superintendent, what do you think about that? I mean, obviously, it's hard when you're at the top to get the straight scoop all the time. When you visit, people are putting on a good face, all that stuff. And Em is saying that there is an avenue with which teachers used to be able to communicate that has gone away. What do you say about that?
Well, first of all, Em, thank you so much for your service to our children and our community. I really appreciate it. And I also understand what a dog and pony show can look like. So I really appreciate that, sometimes when I go into those schools, but the good news is, the nice thing about being the superintendent is when I walk into schools, I just go into any classroom I want. And so I end up talking to the teachers and I talk to the students, and, sometimes administration stays outside. So at least hopefully I'm getting a kind of a fair shake as to what's really happening. But to your point about surveys, Absolutely. So I am a huge fan. And in fact, one of the things that we're working on is not only having surveys for staff, but having surveys for families, for students, and then actually having all of those surveys be part of a much larger system of like, how are we going to support the school district? So I'm glad to hear that there's a history of this. I'm sorry to hear that there's kind of been a pause on this, but please know that one of the things that I am really looking forward to bringing to this district is not just surveys for faculty, staff, families, and students, but a survey that's actually tied to how we're doing for children moving forward. So please, I don't know when, 3 months and 14 days, it's a little bit of a big ship, but like you have my word and that these things are coming and they're going to be hopefully in a more robust way. And that not only are we going to do it, we're going to then share the data, right? I think one of the things that I see in Seattle is we look at stuff or we get stuff, but we're not public about it. We're not transparent about it. And that's something that has to change. So thank you again for your service to our children. And I really appreciate the question about surveys.
Thank you very much for your call, Em. I really appreciate it. And folks can dial in at 206-543-5869 to get your question in with the Seattle Public Schools superintendent. Back to the issue of budgets, superintendent, we had that whole news cycle a few years ago where the district planned on closing up to 20 elementary schools to address the budget shortfall. That didn't happen. Obviously, there is this ongoing issue with the shortfall. Closures are not on the table for 26 or 27, those school years, but you've said that they could be for future school years. And I'm just wondering if you could clarify, how will you determine if closures are necessary to get at this budget gap? What are some of the other cost-saving measures that you will be looking at? We've kind of discussed some of those before closing schools. So primarily, what is the benchmark that says we might have to look at closing schools at this point?
Sure. So, I want to be really clear, right, is we are in a budget crisis and we have to be thoughtful about every dollar that we spend. And so I've always said that everything's on the table. You wouldn't want a superintendent to say, oh, yeah, like we need to save a bunch of money, but we're not going to do this thing, right? And if you look across the country, almost all of the major urban schools are doing it, right? And I'm not saying we have to, but I'm saying is there's a lot of this happening across the country. So there are some real reasons. And again, I want to be clear. You said the 26-27, that's 1 year, the 26-27 school year.
Yeah, so good point.
We
Thank
are
you.
Opening, it's okay. It's all good. And so we're going to open up, this coming September with the same schools that we have. Now, the question is, well, how are we going to make decisions about what might be best for children? And so what we have to do is actually involve the community. So, if there are two schools that are next to each other, in fact, two schools that might share a playground, and one school is half empty and the other one is also half empty, and those communities are really close to each other, why wouldn't we have a meeting that says, hey, what do you think? What might make sense? And it's not about just cost savings. It's about having robust music and art programs. It's about not having to split level classes. I mean, one of the issues about budgets is when you're trying to fit what you've got is that a lot of our schools have these split classrooms where it's half second grade and half third grade. Well, that's not particularly good unless you're doing it really thoughtfully. You don't do it just because you're forced to do it. There's a couple of schools where there's 3 grades in one room. That's not the kind of, forced education that we want to do. So I think, again, we have to be really thoughtful about how we're making decisions with the community, not without the community. And if there's things, to be honest, I get emails from parents all the time that say, Ben, don't tell anybody, but I actually think you might want to merge our school with somebody else. I go, okay. Thanks for being honest. I appreciate that. But, I think the mistake the district made was twofold last time. One, they made a list that was kind of by fiat. And they really didn't, I think, include the community in it. And the second is they were making this argument about budget. It's not really about budget. It's about what's best for kids and teachers. If you're the one third grade teacher in a school, it's really hard to have a colleague in also the same grade where you're sharing lesson plans, you're moving things around. Maybe you're sharing kids, maybe you're doing something creative. If you're the singleton teacher, that's difficult, right? If you have a school that doesn't have full-time art, full-time music, that's difficult for students. I was at a school where they have a music teacher that comes one day a week. Well, it's because there's not that many students there. And so if we had ways that are really robust, I think that the families would really want to have these conversations. And again, I'm not saying we're doing this. I'm saying that it's got to be on the table because we have to have these conversations. And I apologize that the district itself has not been as open, transparent, or even collaborative around these things. So that's part one. The other thing, of course, is restructuring central office, which we're going to be doing over the summer, really taking down the number of different departments and try to really focus on student success. There's also other contracts, things like bus contracts and food contracts that we can be more thoughtful around. Are we being as efficient as possible? Something as simple as like, are we busing a kid from the south of the city all the way to the north of the city? Did anybody just call the parent and say, hey, you sure you want your kid on that long? Maybe there's another school. There's a lot of things that we can do that'll be thoughtful, but it has to be with the community, not to the community.
Really quickly on the issue of budgets, SPS board member Vivian Song had raised another alternative at one point, and that had to do with putting the district into financial oversight with the offices of the superintendent of public instruction, so with the state. That would have to be a situation where the district would enter a binding agreement with the state. They would have certain conditions, and that happens when a district can't produce a balanced budget. There are multiple districts across the state in that situation. Then SPS would have extra oversight, things like that. What is your response to that proposal from the board member, and what would that mean for the district?
Well, I think Director Song is terrific. I really appreciate her thoughtfulness, and honestly, all of the board. The board has been really, really thoughtful. They've shown up in community with me. They've taken school visits. They've talked to folks. So I really appreciate that. And look, when a director says, we might have to consider this, that's a clarion call to, hey, we got to fix something, because the last thing a superintendent, and I would hope the last thing a community would really want, is to give the keys over to the state. There's an old joke in politics sometimes that the scariest language is we're from the government and we're here to help.
That's a Reagan joke, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so now, look, I certainly believe in government. That's why I work in government. I think we actually can do the most good, but we have to be really, scared that if we're giving the keys to somebody else, that means somebody else is going to make decisions for us, right? And so we want to make sure that we don't get there. Now, look, what the truth, of course, is we have decisions we have to make. Some of them are going to be difficult. And if there's a way that we can't make those decisions for whatever reason, then yeah, binding conditions is something that's possible. But my intent is to work collaboratively with all of our wonderful people in this community so that we can solve this ourselves. Because when an outside agency starts to come in and make decisions for us, they're going to be making decisions based solely on numbers and not on the way that our community is going to be impacted. And so the more that we work together, the more that we try to solve this problem ourselves, all the better. But I will say it can't be wishful thinking. We can't say, well, if only we had 10,000 more students, or, oh, if we only just, no, we have X amount of dollars are sent to us. We can only spend that. We can't spend more, because when we do that, we go into deficit. And the thing about school budgets is you cannot show a deficit. So you always have to have a balanced budget. And the moment you cross that line, the moment you cross that zero, then the state has to lend you the money. And the moment you borrow money, you're at the behest of the people that you're lending, that you're getting the money from.
Yeah. So it sounds like you think it's just opening up a lot of potential loss of control at the local level, which communities would not like to see.
I mean, I don't think anybody wants that, right? And so hopefully, together, collaboratively, we're going to get there. And I appreciate Director Song saying that it's a possibility because she's right. It is a possibility. Hopefully, we don't get there.
You're listening to Seattle Public Schools Superintendent Ben Shuldiner. He's taking your calls at 206-543-5869. By the way, this is Soundside on KUOW. We have Kathy in Maple Leaf on the line right now, and Kathy has a couple of kids at Seattle Public Schools. Kathy, thank you so much for calling in, and what is your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. One of the things I just wanted to make a recommendation on is one of the middle schools that one of my kids went to was super locked down, and the secretaries manned the door, and you had to show your ID to get in. And then my other two kids have gone to a high school, and I literally could walk through the doors and walk through the building. Nobody would ever stop me. I could walk up to I just feel like it's too open, some of the schools. I understand that the high school has open lunch. I'm from New York originally, and I worked in the schools in New York for 7 years. And I feel like if you could just place a secretary with a desk at the front door, give her, she can man the phones and do things, but as people are coming through the doors, they could be checking people and checking out people, because if you're letting people into the building, you need to make sure that they're leaving, and I just feel like it's a security risk. I feel like it's something that the teachers shouldn't have to be handling this. They have to teach. They shouldn't have to be monitoring the hallways for, people that don't belong in the building.
Yeah, Kathy, I really appreciate that. Yeah, let's let the superintendent weigh in on that. Basically, Kathy's saying that a younger child in middle school, she's feeling good about the safety situation, but then the high school campus is a little different. What do you think about that, Superintendent? Because obviously safety concerns are huge in the district.
I agree. I've been surprised at how porous our buildings are. I've said it repeatedly. So I really appreciate the parent that said that.
Kathy,
nice to hear another New Yorker.
I know. I heard the accent, and I said, "Hey, somebody from your neck of the woods."
I appreciate it, but she's right. That some of our schools do a really good job with it, and some of our campuses, especially our larger campuses, are not really there, and that's not really any one person's fault or concern. It's the way that we've done our schools is that we don't have single point of entry. We allow for kind of an openness, and certainly the best safety is single point of entry, a million points of exit, right? If there's ever an issue in a building, you want people to be able to evacuate an earthquake, a fire, things like that. And so I think that it's true. And I'm glad that you're highlighting it. And those are the things that we have to work on from our safety and security lens. How easy is it to get into our buildings? But I'll tell you another issue I have is how porous our campuses are. So we have some schools where we have a school building, then they actually have to cross a street or cross a parking lot to get to a field. Sometimes the fields they're using are owned by the city, and so those are actually very open. Sometimes there's it's a patchwork of land, and so we have to be really thoughtful about things like fences, right? Some of our schools, it's so easy for somebody to just walk in, maybe not the building, but to where kids are having PE or playing outside. So I think that the parent really makes a very good and important point about the porousness of our campuses and our buildings. And please know that that's something that we're looking at, right now. I mean, I walk with safety and security every day to make sure that I take pictures. Hey, this door is unlocked, or this door doesn't even have a lock. What are we doing? Right. And I think we're lucky in Seattle that there is this sense of openness, there is this sense of safety, but we do have to recognize the reality, which is bad things can happen. And, an ounce of prevention is a lot better than dealing with it after the fact.
Calls coming in for the Seattle Public Schools Superintendent here on Soundside. You can get in the queue at 206-543-5869. Thank you again to Kathy for that question. We are talking about safety, obviously the tragic murder of two Rainier Beach High School students right as you were beginning your tenure here as the superintendent occurred. And that is something that highlighted the issue of safety. And I'm wondering if you could speak specifically to that incident and what changes it has inspired and what you're still looking at, Superintendent, just in the wake of that.
Of course. First of all, it was a terrible tragedy. Two of our children were murdered. Like, that has to sit with us. That has to lay heavy on our hearts, heavy on our shoulders, heavy on our minds. It was horrible what happened, and we need to make sure that we are supporting our children as best as we can. But what it highlighted for me was that there was a lot of fraught relationships between the school district, the police department, Metro, the city. There were a lot of this historical stuff. Nothing that, I came into this. And one of the first things I tried to do, and I really want to thank the police chief, who, by the way, was a history teacher in schools and then was an SRO. And so, he and I really have a lot of, understanding around this, and just having a relationship with SPD, having a relationship with Metro, having a relationship with our nonprofits that help us support and secure the community. That's really important. And so over the last 3 months, what we've done is be much more of a presence. We're down there on those corners. We're there. I mean, we're working much closer with Metro, with PD, with certainly the communities, but then it's also with our students, because there's three things to think about. One is the physical safety of when you are off campus, right? If you're on campus, that's something that the school district really needs to take care of, like the porous doors and, being able to come in and out. But when you're, at a bus stop, we don't have jurisdiction, right? Like that's a street corner. But we can be there, we can be supportive, but we can also have communications with SPD, with Metro, with our nonprofits who are there. So the physical presence in and around the community is super helpful. But there's a second piece, and the second piece is making sure that you have relationships with the children so that they tell you about something that might happen way before it does. And so that's where, our educators, our mental health support, our community, support folks, that's about having that relationship with the kids, with the families, to say, hey, you know what, Ben, like these kids, like they need a little bit more support. Something might pop off. Like, can we help? Okay, great. And then the third thing, of course, is just making sure that there is an understanding within our own buildings of taking care of our safety and security, right? So there's the community safety and security, and that's about relationships because we don't have leverage. The second is about the relationships with the children and the families so that if something is going to happen, we can help deal with it before it becomes an issue. And then the third thing, of course, is the internal structural safety of our buildings and of our campuses. And so, look, my heart continues to break for the families and the children that have been impacted. And again, I mean, the tragedy of Rainier Beach, it sadly is a tragedy that we've seen in this district before. And it's something that we have to deal with and we have to really address. And so, it was horrible what happened, but I do want to thank the community. I've been out there a lot. The students have been amazing. The faculty has been amazing. The staff, the community, and I see this sense of like we are going to take care of our community. And so all of the folks that are out there on those corners with our kids, supporting them in the building, it's been terrific. It's sad that it took such a tragedy, but I think we're moving forward.
And
I
Superintendent,
really appreciate that.
I want to get to just a couple more issues. I know we've only got a few minutes left here, but really quickly, when you talk to students in Rainier Beach, I mean, we've heard conflicting things about, the presence of police officers making communities feel uncomfortable. And then at the same time, people saying we want to know the officers who are walking the beat. We want to see, more presence of Seattle police around our schools. I mean, what do you get a clear message in terms of the role of police in, spending time around schools?
Sure. I mean, a lot of people have a lot of opinions, and I have to do my best to listen to them, make them feel comfortable that they can be honest with me and just with the community. And so what I hear, of course, for everybody is we want to feel safe. And what does that look like? And what I hear from the students actually more than anybody is we really would like to have a lot of extra presence. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the classroom or in the hallway. The issue really, a lot of it is at the bus stop, right? Like on the corner outside of the building. But what's interesting is a lot of students, especially from Rainier Beach, have been asking for weapons detectors. Right. Like, so they, and this is from students, right? This isn't me. This isn't, and what's been interesting is when you listen to the students, when you listen to the faculty at the school, rather than maybe folks not from the community, maybe from other folks, it has been interesting. But what I've definitely heard for everybody is we need to have a better relationship with the PD. We need to have a better relationship from Metro. And that's what we really have to do, because if something happens 2 blocks from a school, the school district doesn't have jurisdiction, right? We cannot physically do something. I mean, I'll do it as a citizen, of course, but like if we have police and Metro there who we know, who we can trust, who we are working with them, we know that can be really powerful. So I want to thank the chief. I want to thank everybody that's been really working on this. And again, our partnerships with our nonprofits who are also in the community at the bus stop. Those are the things. But what I hear from the students is we want to feel safe. We actually, some of them have been very direct. They would like weapons detectors at their school because they say, hey, look, I'm walking in, I get to feel safer knowing I went through this. Not that they feel like they're being treated as if they did something wrong. It's as if you went to a Mariners game.
Yeah, it's more peace of mind for them. Just because we have limited time, I'm going to pivot here over, and that the next topic I want to bring up with you is the academic achievement and scores when it comes to math and reading. This has been a big headline right now, just nationwide, looking at, compared to a decade ago, the New York Times reports reading scores have dropped 83% nationwide. Math scores have dropped by 70%. Again, these are problems everywhere. And that slide started before the pandemic. We did get a message from a listener who said, I'm curious about steps the superintendent intends to take regarding universal reading screening for middle and high schoolers. And I understand that it takes place in elementary school and some K through 8s, but not at many middle and high schools. We know reading scores aren't where we want them to be. What do you want to say about the decline in reading rates, not just in Seattle, but everywhere, and how to address them at SPS?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're right. We're seeing it across the country. But, when you look at the data in Seattle, again, aggregate, we are doing well, but in certain populations, we're not. And that's on us, right? This is not about blaming children. Our children are amazing. They will rise to the level of expectation. It's about, are we putting, kind of the students in the best position in which they can learn? And so one of the most important things is let's make sure that we have a high quality curriculum that we're teaching to fidelity and then holding people accountable to making sure that we're giving them support so that they can rise. And so we just approved a new ELA curriculum, K-5. I think that's going to be a really big thing. You've probably heard a lot about the science of reading and stuff like that. And so, we're really doubling down on that curriculum. There's also something called UFly and Haggerty. There's a lot of really good things that we can do in the classroom that you will see actually move the needle. When I was in Lansing, it was very similar. Now, those numbers were, when I got there, were much, much lower, certainly, but we were able to increase every year. Some grades, we doubled proficiency rates. And the reason was by saying, hey, teachers, we know you care about our kids. We know that you want to do well. Let us help give you the tools and the curriculum and the support. And then let's take a look at not just the aggregate, but maybe there's specific issues. So a good example, maybe you had two teachers in 3rd grade, and there was a 50% pass rate. Well, it's possible that one teacher has a 100% pass rate and another teacher has a 0% pass rate. So what are we doing to support the teacher that where the students aren't doing well? Maybe something else is going on. Maybe we need to do that. But what districts tend to do, especially large districts, is that they don't look granularly. We need to start with the student. Which students need help? Which students are we going to focus on?
And because we just have a couple minutes left, I mentioned we want to get to disparities, just giving you 2 minutes for this one. I know it's a bigger issue, but when we look look at third grade literacy rates, this was part of a presentation that you made to the district. You know, SPS is 15 points below the benchmark goal for kids with free and reduced lunch. 76% of white kids in the district are meeting that third grade literacy standard, while only 31% of black kids. I mean, these are really shocking numbers in terms of that gap. So again, bigger issue than what we have time for right now, but 2 minutes, like what is the plan to close that gap?
Yeah, I mean, again, you have to focus on it, right? I mean, you have to call it out first and say, hey, look, there's these disparities. And then you have to look at where are those disparities happening. When they started to change graduation rates in America, what they found was almost about 20% of the schools was where 80% of the dropouts were happening. So if you can focus on where the issues are, things can happen. But when you take this 30,000-foot view and you're like, well, things are okay, not great. That's not how you deal with it. You say, hey, are there schools, are there classrooms where that disparity is happening so that we can help support them? Because again, our kids are amazing. I know they can rise to the level of expectation, but if the classrooms they're in, the schools they're in, the programs they're in aren't serving them, we've got to pinpoint that support and then actually hold folks accountable. We have to be transparent. Here is the school where this is happening. Here's their numbers. We expect them to be here. Let's give them all this. This is not about being punitive. This is about being supportive and collaborative so that we can actually move the needle forward for our children.
Superintendent Ben Shuldiner of Seattle Public Schools. Boy, I don't know if I really was concerned about filling the time in terms of getting enough questions, but we got more questions on the line than we could get to. So thank you to all the callers. We are going to do this again. I hope, sir, if you'll come back.
I would love it. I would love it.
Great. Let's make this a regular thing. Superintendent, thank you so much for joining me on Soundside today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.